We're going to get started this morning with the fallout from this weekend's U.S. airstrikes on Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen as the war between Israel and Hamas continues to reverberate throughout the Middle East.
On Sunday, U.S. Central Command said that it struck a Houthi cruise missile and 4 anti-ship cruise missiles. A day earlier, U.S. and U.K. forces hit 36 Houthi targets in 13 locations in Yemen, with officials saying they were trying to disrupt and degrade the capabilities of the rebel group. Saturday's barrage came just one day after the U.S. carried out its first wave of airstrikes on 85 targets in Iraq and Syria. It's all in response to the killing of 3 American soldiers in Jordan just over a week ago. Speaking on Meet the Press yesterday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said these strikes were just the beginning.
We intend to take additional strikes and additional action to continue to send a clear message that the United States will respond when our forces are attacked or people are killed. We do believe that the strikes had good effect in degrading the capabilities of these militia groups to attack us.
From Washington to the Middle East, we have full team coverage this morning, beginning with NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez in Tel Aviv. So, Raf, walk us through these airstrikes we saw across the Middle East over the weekend, and what's some of the reaction you're hearing from the Houthis, from Iran, and others?
Yeah, Joe, good morning. A lot of strikes all across the region this weekend. Let's start Friday with those American strikes, eastern Syria, western Iraq, at Iranian-backed militant groups and Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, those strikes, carried out solely by the United States, were in response to last week's deadly drone attack in Jordan, which killed 3 U.S. service personnel. At this point, there has not been major retaliation by Iranian-backed militants in the Middle East. We have heard Iran itself condemning the strikes. It does not appear that any Iranian personnel were killed in these bombings. But Iran also, at this point, is not promising major retaliation. So we are waiting to see whether these strikes have achieved their deterrent effect, which was the intent to show Tehran that these attacks by Iranian-backed militants cannot continue. In Yemen, we saw more strikes by both the U.S. and the U.K., and this is in response to attacks by Houthi militants against commercial shipping in the Red Sea, which is causing such chaos, shipping lines all across the world. The Houthis are saying they are not deterred. These attacks will continue. A statement from their military spokesman, which I'll read to you, says, "These attacks will not deter us from our moral, religious, and humanitarian stance in support of the resilient Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and will not go unanswered or unpunished." So the Houthis saying these attacks on commercial ships will continue as long as the war in Gaza does. Guys.
Raf, let's talk about the latest on the ground in Gaza. We understand Israel is planning to expand its assault on Rafah in the south. This is the last place that was designated to be a safe zone by the Israelis. What are we seeing there?
Right. So, Savannah, Rafah, all the way in the south of Gaza, right up against the Egyptian border. More than half the population of the Gaza Strip, well over 1 million people, are now crowded up against that border, and there is literally nowhere to run. The Egyptians have concertina wire. That border is totally sealed, and many of these people have fled the entire length of the Gaza Strip. They are from the north of Gaza, they fled to the middle, to the south, and now they are at the southernmost edge. But Israel's military is saying it will pursue Hamas into Rafah itself, trying to destroy those smuggling tunnels through which weapons have been shipped. I was in Gaza over the weekend, and I asked an Israeli commander, how can you possibly fight in a place where there are more than 1 million civilians without causing mass casualties? He said if the order came from Israel's political leadership to go into Rafah, they would do that. They would carry out that attack, but they would do what they could to limit civilian casualties. Guys.
So, Raf, where do things stand with the hostage ceasefire negotiations? We understand this proposed deal is dividing Israel's right-wing cabinet. What's the latest?
Yeah, that's right. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he will not agree to release thousands of Palestinian prisoners, some of whom are convicted of terrorism offenses, from Israeli jails, and that he will not end the war in Gaza as part of any agreement to free the hostages. He is under major pressure from the far right of his cabinet not to be seen to be making concessions to Hamas. From Hamas's perspective, they say they are still studying the framework of this proposal that was hammered out in Paris at a meeting of spy chiefs, including the CIA director. At this point, they are not saying yes or no to this deal, but they are saying prisoners need to be released on a large scale, and there does have to be an end to the war. Guys.
All right, Raf Sanchez. Raf, thank you so much.
Let's now turn to NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, thanks for being here. So if we could go back to these strikes that we saw carried out over the weekend, we mentioned a moment ago, we've heard the administration say this is just the beginning on these strikes. Do we know how long this campaign could last?
We don't know exactly, Savannah and Joe, but it's likely this could take weeks. And we knew that senior officials had really previewed that this could be in multiple locations in multiple countries, which we've started to see. But there is this larger question about, could there be another component beyond just the kinetic strikes, what you're seeing there and what took place in the last couple of days? And likely what we will not see as visibly, but which the U.S. is still trying to send a strong message with, is something like cyber attacks directly at these Iranian assets. And so that is likely another aspect to this that is coming, but it could take some time. And the U.S. has been very careful to say they don't want to telegraph any of this or allow people to know when it's going to take place, as the U.S. has said it will do it in a time and manner of its choosing.
As we mentioned, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was on Meet the Press yesterday. He was pushed on whether the U.S. would strike inside Iran. At this point, do we know if that is a possibility?
Well, the National Security Advisor didn't completely take it off the table, but the Biden administration has been clear for weeks that it doesn't seek a wider war with Iran. It does not want to escalate this conflict in that manner. And so the strategy has been to really hit these Iranian-backed militias where they have their most important weapons and assets outside of Iran. But here is how Jake Sullivan answered when Kristen Welker pressed him on the show yesterday.
I'm not going to get into what we've ruled in and ruled out from the point of view of military action. What I will say is that the president is determined to respond forcefully to attacks on our people. The president also is not looking for a wider war in the Middle East.
But is it off the table? Are strikes inside Iran off the table?
Again, Kristen, sitting here on television, it would not be wise for me to talk about what we're ruling in and ruling out.
And so far, at least this weekend, guys, it hasn't been clear that there has been any contact from the Iranian government or Iranian military officials to the United States to talk about this. So that's something to watch for in the coming days.
And Monica, we know Secretary Blinken is back in the Middle East for his 5th trip to the region since October. What can we expect from this visit?
He will be traveling to Saudi Arabia, to Israel, Egypt, and Qatar, all with this purpose of, again, trying to tamp down some of these tensions, lower the temperature, and then also to continue to see if there's progress that can be made on that potential hostage deal while trying to increase aid, humanitarian assistance into Gaza. This is something that when Secretary Blinken is there face-to-face meeting with people, he says he can try to advance the ball a little bit. But as we did hear from Raf and from Jake Sullivan yesterday on the Sunday shows, they don't believe that deal to release hostages is, quote, right around the corner, but they're hoping something can materialize in the short term, at least in the coming weeks, maybe in a month.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel, good to have you with us. So let's just talk about your impressions of this weekend's strikes in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. How effective do you think they were?
Well, they were effective in reducing the capability of Iran-backed militias to conduct attacks to the extent that we destroy command and control nodes, communications nodes, and actual sites of missiles and drone sources. This is going to be effective, which is one reason why Jake Sullivan said that he's not going to rule out continuing these attacks and will probably conduct more of these attacks. We have an entire target list. Follow these launchers from place to place. We know where a lot of them are, and from time to time, we will attack them. Don't forget that they're all related, but there are actually two things going on here at the same time. One is attacks by the Houthis on shipping through the Red Sea, Straits of Hormuz, making requiring ships then to go around the Cape of Good Hope and tripling the distance that ships have to go, increasing costs, reducing the capability to deliver goods, and raising interest rates. That is strictly Houthis backed by Iran. And to the extent that the Houthis continue the attacks, both the United States and Great Britain will continue attacks, retaliatory strikes on Houthi positions. Separately, though still backed also by Iran, are attacks on American bases in Iraq and Syria by Iran-backed militias. Those counterstrikes against them are going to continue. And the United States and Britain are not going to wait until there are further attacks on American bases to continue retaliatory strikes on these militias. There is much more to come. And you heard from Monica always the possibility of conducting cyber attacks on Iranian interests rather than attacks on Iran specifically.
Colonel, just very quickly, then, what does that mean? Where do you see things going from here?
There will be continued attacks on militias in Syria and Iraq. But I think that you can always expect that if the attacks on American interests continue, that there might be American retaliatory strikes on Iranian ships that are in the region who conduct surveillance on American interests and on ships and relay that to their militias. We've seen that before, and we're liable to see it again.
All right, Colonel Jack Jacobs, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
You bet.
Well, extreme weather continues to hit the West Coast, with millions of Americans still under flood alerts this morning. California's governor has declared a state of emergency as much of the state faces life-threatening conditions.
So let's get a check on your morning news now forecast with meteorologist Michelle Grossman. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And I wish I had better news, because we are looking at a very troublesome next 24 hours. We're looking at dangerous flooding, life-threatening flash flooding, catastrophic flooding, mudslides, debris flows, really gusty winds, bringing down power lines and power outages, causing power outages. Over 600,000 people are without power at this hour, and that number will continue to grow. But let's take a look at alerts, because we're looking at 38 million people under flood alerts. We have flood warnings happening right now. That means flooding is happening right now, or it is imminent. Winter alerts, 1 million. We're going to be measuring snow in feet once again, up to 4 feet in some spots. And we have wind alerts. Winds are going to be gusting to hurricane force speed. So we have really soggy ground that's bringing down trees. It's bringing down power outages. And that's why we're seeing power lines. That's why we're seeing the power outages. This is what radar looks like right now. The bullseye will be Southern California, but we are seeing some heavy rain right now in portions of Northern California. That's where you're seeing those brighter colors. But this stream of moisture over Los Angeles has been going on for hour after hour after hour. They're under a flood warning until 12 o'clock Pacific time. So we're going to continue to watch that. And it's very, very soggy. So really doesn't have much places to go. We have burn areas, and that's why we're seeing the debris flows and also the mudslides. Lots of evacuations in some spots in Southern California. So we're going to continue to watch this at least over the next 24 hours. That's part of the problem, too. The rain is heavy, but it's continuing for a long time and not really tapering until later on Wednesday. So this is the powerful storm. It's another atmospheric river, lots of moisture with it, torrential rainfall continuing over Southern California. Also seeing some thunderstorms with it. Because of that, we're seeing that debris flows, the rock slides, the mudslides, and we've already seen instances of that. And then by tomorrow, the heaviest rain from South California to Arizona. We're looking at some really heavy snow throughout the Rockies, also the Sierra Nevada mountains over the next several days. And take a look at some of the numbers. We already set a daily record yesterday in downtown Los Angeles. That goes back to 1927. But we're going to add another 5 inches in some spots. And the higher elevations in the mountains and foothills, some storm totals will be up to 14 inches of rain. And again, we mentioned that snow up to 4 feet. So lots of rain still to come. Because of that, we do have a flooding risk. We have a flash flooding risk as well. Where you see that pink color, the moderate risk, the high risk, that that will be the likeliest spot of seeing some really catastrophic flooding, some dangerous flooding. Los Angeles, also Long Beach, down to portions of San Diego. Tomorrow, that flood risk does stay in place, the flash flood risk. We're looking at Los Angeles once again, San Diego. And then it moves into the southwest. So now it includes Phoenix and it includes places like Prescott. There's the snowfall totals where you see those pinks and purples. That's going to be the highest amount. So we're talking the northern Rockies into the Sierra Nevada mountains. 4 to 6 feet are possible. Good news for the skiers, bad news for people trying to travel in those areas with those winds really gusting. That's the big storm in the west. Another big story, February warmth in portions of the northern plains, the upper Midwest into the central plains. We're looking at temperatures once again well above normal for this time of year. That's going to move to the east as we go throughout the next couple of days. But we're looking good in the rest of the country. The Northeast, we had a really nice week in the Mid-Atlantic, too. We're going to continue that over the next several days. Really no rain in the forecast until later on this week.
All right. We'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Turning now to Washington, where senators have announced a massive bipartisan bill addressing the number of migrants crossing the southern border.
The $118 billion bill is spearheaded by Senators Kyrsten Sinema, an independent, James Lankford, a Republican, and Chris Murphy, a Democrat. It also includes funding for both the war in Ukraine and the Middle East. Today, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer plans to kick off the voting process on the bill. In a statement, Schumer said the agreement is, quote, a monumental step towards strengthening America's national security abroad and along our borders. This is one of the most necessary and important pieces of legislation Congress has put forward in years.
NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us to break this all down. Hi, Julie. Good morning. So advocates of the bill say it's the most comprehensive immigration legislation presented in over a decade. Tell us some of the highlights here and where we saw some big compromises.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Well, negotiators held calls all night long last night trying to clear up some of the misconceptions that are being said about this bill, particularly from Republicans. And one of the main points that they emphasized to us who were on the call was that their goal is to eventually end illegal immigration. So that's important framing when you think about this bill, because some of the biggest provisions, you see it on your screen, it requires the border be shut down when you see some of those migrant surges exceeding 5,000 daily average. That is a provision that is very conservative. Republicans, in theory, would support that, though they are saying that this instead would allow for more illegal immigration. That's not what this bill does. Second, it raises the screening for that asylum interview. It doesn't change the qualifications by which migrants are eligible for asylum, but it does make the interview a little bit more complicated and challenging, weeding out, for example, if someone has a criminal history or they're able to seek asylum in their own country or they were in a safe country already. All of those things are going to happen on the front end now. And also, this ends the practice of catch and release. That means migrants who come legally at ports of entry are placed under government surveillance while they await their asylum interview and later their adjudication, wait for their case to be adjudicated. If migrants come in between ports of entry, they are detained. And this bill increases funding to do just that. It also increases more resources for Border Patrol agents to hire more agents for more processing, and also changes the way the cases are adjudicated, making that process a lot faster. So certainly a lot of changes made in this bill. One thing it doesn't do that Democrats certainly accepted as a major concession in terms of those who negotiated this bill is there is no pathway for citizenship for undocumented dreamers. That was something that was a red line for so many Democrats just a couple of months ago, and certainly you'll see support peel off on that.
So, Julie, as we mentioned earlier, the bill also includes this long-awaited funding for Ukraine, more funding for Israel's war against Hamas. How did that part of the bill come together?
Well, those pieces of the legislation are largely unchanged. In total, the bill is about $12 billion more. That's for all of those pieces than President Biden had requested back in October. Excuse me. Certainly, these pieces of the bill were the more easy parts to move, and some, like Senate Minority Leader McConnell, for example, last week already threatened. He said, listen, if the border piece can't get done, certainly he supports the bill that was negotiated. They're going to have to move just Ukraine and just Israel aid alone. Again, though, this bill also includes humanitarian aid that is seen as key by many Republicans and Democrats, mostly Democrats, of course. And also you have the House Republicans who have put forward a clean Israel bill that they say they will take up this week. Certainly it's going to be a lot of politics.
So, Julie, House Speaker Johnson is already speaking out against this bill just hours before it was announced. Let's listen to what he had to say with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press.
Did you propose this standalone Israel aid package to kill this compromise deal in the Senate?
No, we've made very clear what the requirements of the House were, and that is to solve the problem at the border. Apparently, the Senate has not been able to come to an agreement. They've been suggesting text should be filed maybe today, but we've been told the same thing for months now. We've been awaiting their action. We cannot wait any longer. The House is willing to lead, and the reason we have to take care of this Israel situation right now is because the situation has escalated.
Julie, bearing that, is there any hope this bill will make it to President Biden's desk?
Well, Speaker Johnson, hours after the bill was released last night, said this bill is, quote, dead on arrival. He also said that the text was worse than what he imagined the bill to be beforehand. Senator James Lankford, who's the top Republican negotiating this bill, mind you, Lankford is a conservative Republican from Oklahoma. He immediately fact-checked Johnson in real time on a call with reporters last night. He said that he wants the opportunity to brief the Speaker on this text specifically to clear up some of the misconceptions because, again, this bill does lean very forwardly in the conservative direction. But bottom line here, as I said, guys, the House will move forward on this Clean Israel bill. I should note that originally the House had passed an Israel bill back in October with those offsets being that it's paid for. Now that goes away in order to get some Democrats to vote for it. Again, though, the Senate planning to move forward with this supplemental bipartisan package nonetheless.
Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.